Thank you very much for the invitation. So my presentation today is going to be talking more about the enabling side of collaboration. I think enough's been said about why we've got barriers, and as the Minister alluded to, there's lots of challenges facing our nation. But how do we turn that around? What are some of the differences in thinking that we actually need? And it's not just going to focus on the depth of advanced manufacturing. How do we see advanced manufacturing as part of a much larger ecosystem? So I've been doing a lot of work in actually helping organisations think beyond today's problems. And we've been doing this through this lens called design-led innovation. Some of you may have heard of it. I've actually worked with some of you in the room on this. And what I want to show today is how I believe it actually can be an enabler to address, I suppose, some of the mindsets we need for this nation to drive both research collaboration and commercialisation. So I just want to say up front, when we talk about design, it's one of those words that's very, very confusing. It has many meanings, and there's quite a good continuum of how design can help a business. It's always helped businesses. You've all used in design. In the previous presentation, we talked about design for medical products or equipment or actual outputs. That's very much a tangible use of design, and my background's a designer, industrial designer. And that's very much in step 2, design as a functional element. Step 3, design as an innovation process. You see this really being taken up by banks, user experience, user interaction design, new actual applications of experiential work. The 4th one, design as a business strategy. You see the lean launchpad, startups using this to get that customer-centric view of actually who their market is. So we go from a product to the founder's vision to a customer into commercialization. They're all good applications of design. But where we talk about design to enable collaboration and commercialization, there's 2 other steps. How do you transform an organization or a business about a new value proposition? Where do you start to look at disruptions for it? Where do you actually bring some of that thinking in? And it's more than just the actual physical aspects of the actual challenge. It's really starting at the mindset and the business model of the organization. The last one there, design of a national competitive strategy. This is some of the work we've been doing with the growth centres to help them design a 10-year vision. And then what does that look like to enable what you should be doing today? So I'm going to be talking really much in that design as organisational transformation. Now last year I was commissioned by the government, and some people in the room here helped with this, to look at what is design for manufacturing competitiveness. And this report was quite well received in that we actually found a number of different companies who are leading by design, naturally. And inside that report we talked about this model, these 10 types of innovation that sit down below here. And what we found was these firms who were successful, and these were in the top 3 or 4% that the Minister was referring to, were able to actually look at those 10 different types of innovation and see them as one. They didn't treat them as individuals. But what we find time and time again is that most innovation is happening in that yellow area, the offering, the product performance or the product system. And that's really good to do. You actually need that. But in terms of uncertainty we're dealing with, we need to see across this. So in that report, I used a case study from Cochlear. It wasn't Cochlear today, it was actually Cochlear when it actually started back in the 80s. And it was transitioning from a body-worn system to their first behind-the-ear system. Quite a technological challenge in itself. And I remember I interviewed the staff and the board at that time. So Catherine Livingston was the CEO at the time. And they talked about they had solved the problem of hearing. So they could have kept on solving the problem of hearing. And actually most of the engineers wanted to solve the problem of hearing. Very technical challenge. But what they did was they needed to go from the offering and actually talk about, it was all now about customer engagement and experiences. Because now the problem wasn't about just hearing, it was about the interaction between the child and the parent. Once you take that lens of your business and open up your problem from that customer view, it opens up opportunities to actually completely look at new business models, so the configuration size, who we should be talking to, how we should be talking to them, and what are the research opportunities to allow us to actually take that value proposition back into our offering. So I think it's a good example of how Cochlear really allowed itself to actually become exponential in growing from not just becoming a technology-led company to becoming design-led, by really shifting who its customer was. And that's the key part of what design-led innovation does. So how does this focus on advanced manufacturing? we did some work. We were engaged by FIAL, the Food Innovation Precinct, a little while ago to look at their SME Solution Centre program. A really, really good program of actually helping SMEs collaborate with organisations like CSIRO or Dairy Innovation Australia, forget the other one. And they were essentially where the CEO or the SME would present a problem and the industry organisation would actually solve that problem for them. Very good example of collaboration. And you can see out there that there was very good success, and I think from the 18 companies that went through, or a number of companies, about $40 million was generated in extra commercialisation. They then asked us, how do we value add that? How could we go further? So we then redid the process with some of the firms and actually got them, the firms, with the scientists, to both look at their business differently, to look at their customers differently. And the actual challenge or the opportunities that came out of that was they looked at their long-term approach. They looked at new opportunities in different supply chains they hadn't seen. They really looked at business model innovation. In every case, the research question that went back to CSIRO was different. And it opened up new collaborations that the scientists never saw. So this becomes a very simple model and very practical, that's in the language of SMEs, to start thinking about their business differently. Now, you put a scientist in the same room with them, it opens up exponentially the opportunities of how collaboration happens without really any investment. Because all you're actually asking is them to think differently and have the time to think about their business differently. And you can read the report and the full case study at that link there. And so, for those of you who, Andrew Stevens has been talking about the growth centre, he's been using this slide, which is actually coming out of manufacturing for Europe. And it's referred to as a smile curve. And it really kind of shows back to those 10 types of innovation. That, as we see over time in the 70s, there's always been this focus on production offering and production in advanced manufacturing. That's shifting downwards. And the value adding is actually coming more into the intangibles, or how do you capture value. This isn't a question about whether services or production should be separated. It's a question of how do you integrate those two together. And that's what design does. It completely looks at a holistic view of actually what is the business and where do they all go together. And I believe that if we're trying to look at collaboration, innovation, this is a great model of actually looking at the entire organisation, getting them to think differently will be an enabler for the future. Thank you very much.